Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 22, Text 5. Now I have resolved all my doubts simply by meeting you, for your lordship has very kindly and clearly explained the duty of a king who desires to protect his subjects. Purport. Manu described herewith the result of seeing a great saintly person. Lord Chaitanya says that one should always try to associate with saintly persons, because if one establishes a proper association with a saintly person, even for a moment, one attains all perfection. Somehow or other, if one meets a saintly person and achieves his favor, then the entire mission of one's human life is fulfilled. In our personal experience, we have actual proof of this statement of Manu. Once we had the opportunity to meet Vishnupad Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, and on first sight, he requested this humble self to preach his message in the Western countries. There was no preparation for this, but somehow or other he desired it, and by his grace we are now engaged in executing his order, which has given us a transcendental occupation and has saved and liberated us from the occupation of material activities. Thus, it is actually a fact that if one meets a saintly person completely engaged in transcendental duties and achieves his favor, then one's life's mission becomes complete. What is not possible to achieve in thousands of lives can be achieved in one moment if there is an opportunity to meet a saintly person. It is therefore enjoined in Vedic literature that one should always try to associate with saintly persons and try to disassociate oneself from the common man, because by one word of a saintly person, one can be liberated from material entanglement. A saintly person has this power because of his spiritual advancement, to give immediate liberation to the conditioned soul. Here Manu admits that all his doubts are now over, because Kardama has very kindly described the different duties of individual souls. Stava sandarshanadeva chinname sarva samshaya yatsvayam bhagavan tvicha dharmanaha rarakshasho. Now I have resolved all my doubts simply by meeting you, for your lordship has very kindly and clearly explained the duty of a king who desires to protect his subjects. So, if you meet a saintly person, or one who is factually Krishna conscious, when you meet him, he tends to say things which directly correspond to something which is going on in your mind or consciousness. In other words, within everybody's mind or consciousness, there are things going on. And these things go on as a natural consequence of one's own development. And then, when you meet somebody who's spiritually advanced, he tends to understand everything which is going on within one's mind without even having to talk about it. And he tends to say things which specifically address the issues which are there within one's mind. This is the nature of spiritual advancement. As soon as you have some advancement, you understand what is what about all kinds of things. It is not a question of position, it is a question of consciousness. When one's consciousness is purified, he tends to understand many things. When one's consciousness is not purified, regardless of the position, he tends to not understand anything. So, in this regard, we find, although Kardama Muni was not related with Swayambhuva Manu in any way, formally or informally, officially or otherwise, but because Kardama Muni was a saintly personality, Swayambhuva Manu said that now, after I've heard what you've said, my doubts about various duties are now dispelled, and I wish to continue with this discussion. In other words, Swayambhuva Manu says, thank you. You've told me exactly what I needed to hear. Even if it's obvious, sometimes we need to hear something. one should never be afraid of hearing the obvious. Because, in fact, it is the obvious, simple things which keep us Krishna conscious. Little things like, we are Krishna's eternal servants. We're not the masters. We're not the lords. Little things like this tend to help us very much when we hear them, even though we probably already know it. Oh, I already know that. Oh, really? Who already knows? Fully. Yes, I'm Krishna's eternal servant. I have no other business than this. Yeah. And one who does know like that, he's a firm and fixed devotee of the Lord. This is very nice. Yeah. So, we all would benefit by hearing the obvious. Therefore, we find that, I'll give an example. In Vrindavan in 1974, when Srila Prabhupada once came, was at the time when the temple was supposed to open by Janmashtami, but it was impossible to open the temple. It was out of the question. So at that time, Prabhupada was feeling rather blissful about the whole business of the temple being constructed. It was very nice in Vrindavan, Krishna's place. So he started to talk very nicely about Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. But, and it was very blissful. But after a few days, he realized that all the devotees in the temple were in typical Maya. They weren't doing what they were supposed to do when they were supposed to do it. And everything was going very slowly. Nothing was going very quickly. Nothing was very together. Therefore, he started to give lectures like, you're not your body, you're eternal servant of Krishna, your business is to serve Krishna. Immediately all of the higher level discussions canceled, and now back to the basics. Because when you can't even do the simple things in Krishna consciousness, like serving Krishna with dedication, determination, following the principles, like coming to the programs, chanting your rounds, then it's back to the basics for you. It's about time you hear the basic, simple, obvious things again, which keep this whole Krishna consciousness process continuing. Yeah. So one should never be afraid of these simple things, because in fact they're the most powerful. It's like the Hare Krishna mantra is the most powerful of all. But it's very simple. It's only 3 words. Hare Krishna and Rama. Other mantras are much more complicated. Very complicated. So many mula mantras there are for particular deities. And all these mantras, very complicated, many syllables, 18, 24, 32, 64 syllables within these mantras, complex meter. You have to really practice to get that mantra very nicely. But if you just chant Hare Krishna mantra, it's only 3 words, very simple. So there can be no complications there. It's simple and obvious, yet it is the most powerful of all mantras. It is, we say, Nama Chintamani Krishna Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha Purna Shuddha Nitya Mukto Abhinatam Nama Namino, as a demonstration of the potency of this mantra. Or Kirtanat Eva Krishnasya Mukta Sangha Param Bhajet. Simply by chanting the holy name of Krishna, one will get liberated from the bondages of all material entanglements. It's the embodiment of all spiritual bliss, knowledge, rasa. It is the life of all devotional service. It is complete, purna, shuddha, eternally pure, nitya mukto, always liberated, abhinatvam nama namino. And the name of the Lord and the Lord Himself are not different. Because this mantra is simply the name of the Lord, and therefore it is the most potent of all mantras. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama eva kevalam. Kalo nasyeva 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 gatiranyata. Simple, isn't it? Every bhakta can quote that verse. But how many actually understand it? when there's difficulties, or when the mind is saying this or that, or we're having agitations or disturbances or whatever, how many take shelter of the holy name of the Lord? Much easier just to listen to the mind as it babbles on, telling us this, that, and the other thing, about how wonderful we are and how bad everybody else is. This is the typical babbling of the mind. The mind immediately starts to describe your glories and starts to pick out all of the problems of other persons. And in this way, our mind pollutes us, contaminates us, and cheats us. Therefore, Raghunath Das Goswami described the mind as the king of cheats, a cheater, because it cheats us away from the lotus feet of Krishna. The mind takes that which would ordinarily be a simple affair and turns it into a very complicated thing. Complications arise when one cannot fix his mind on Krishna, and in fact is attached to mundane sense gratification in different forms. Therefore, one who actually learns how to take shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that personality is intelligent. He who knows how to chant the holy name of the Lord when he's feeling distressed in various ways, that person is actually a fit candidate for going back home, back to Godhead at the end of life. For after all, when you die, things aren't going to be very nice. Things are going to become all disturbed, agitated, frustrated. You're going to be breaking apart in different pieces, at least internally, maybe externally. Who knows the way we go. Therefore, if we haven't practiced chanting the holy name when there's a little disturbance during the healthy times, can you imagine how difficult it will be in the difficult times? Therefore, one should get back to the basics. What are the basics? Chanting Hare Krishna mantra and meaning it. That simple thing. To actually chant and listen. Just like you can see immediately the difference in any kirtan. Somebody's chanting and hearing, so he's dancing with a smile on his face. Somebody's chanting and not hearing, he stands there and just looks at the ceiling or the walls or the floor, wonders what all these people are blissful about anyway. Bah humbug. You know that statement? No. But anyway, it means just what I said. What are they all blissful about anyway? What do they have to be blissful about? Why can't they be miserable like me? Because I listen to my mind. Yeah. Better you listen to your mind and get frustrated than you surrender to Krishna and get blissful. It's the way the mind thinks. Mind is so incredible. It will convince you it's better to listen to your mind and be frustrated than to surrender to Krishna and be blissful. Isn't that amazing? The mind can cheat away even the most intelligent person. The mind can drag away even a man of discrimination if it allows itself to be fixed on a particular object of the senses. As soon as the mind becomes fixed on one particular object of the senses, doesn't matter what it is capable of dragging away the discrimination of even a very intelligent person. Therefore, we even say, or it is said, that one should not even sit together in a lonely place with one's mother or daughter or sister. Why? Because even a very intelligent, strong, learned personality may be carried away in the senses. Balavan, Indriya Gramo, the senses are so strong. Balavan, possessing great power. Indriya Gramo. Vidvamsam apikarsati. Even you are Vidvan, very learned person. They can drag you away. Therefore, one must, in the beginning, avoid contact with the objects of the senses. Otherwise, it will be very, very difficult for one to continue in spiritual life. Therefore, in the Vedic culture, husband and wife would never stay together in the same room. They always had separate rooms because they knew that in this world, the hardest thing in the whole universe is to control the senses, which is the cause of all agitation of the mind, all frustration, and all ruination of all blissfulness. As soon as one surrenders to the senses, then immediately he loses the capacity to surrender to Krishna. So much you surrender your senses, so much you don't surrender to Krishna. It's a very simple formula. So when one understands this simple formula and follows simple formulas, he becomes Krishna conscious. But who wants to do that? After all, who wants to become Krishna conscious? Better to stay in Maya and suffer in the two pits of material existence, happiness and distress. For if we can continue suffering in these pits of material existence, we'll be very happy. And we can, of course, agitate many others also in this pit of material existence by continuously being in Maya and complaining about this, that, or the other thing, or trying to understand how everybody else is completely mad and we're the only sane person on the planet. We've even heard people say this. I'm the only sane person on the planet. That's a quote. Some people think like that. They look around and they only see madmen and they run away screaming. Well, that's also a madman. If you look around everywhere and only see madness, that must mean there's madness within you. It's like a question of jaundice. If you have jaundiced eye, then everything seems yellow to you. Or if you have jaundice, then even nice tasting sugar tastes very bitter, like stool. It is a question of the tongue being contaminated. So, Swayambhuva Manu came to Kardama Muni and received some mercy. Actually, we find that when the spiritual master meets disciples, sometimes he tells him something which is very, very eternally beneficial, and gives him some instruction which helps him so much in his spiritual life, just from the very beginning. I remember in our case as well, Srila Prabhupada's case is mentioned in the purport. In our case as well, the first things Prabhupada said to me factually was that we should travel all over the world together, which later on actually turned out to be true. And this idea of traveling around the world preaching Krishna consciousness became part and parcel of the spiritual life. So we find that sometimes the spiritual master will say something in the very beginning which can formulate a basis for one's advancement in Krishna consciousness. Sometimes. Not all the time. Sometimes later on he will give even a more important instruction. Just like in the case of Srila Prabhupada. At first glance, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada asked him to go to the Western countries and preach Krishna consciousness in the English language. Later on, he expressed many important instructions in terms of book production. And at one point he said, there is this temple in Calcutta called Bagh Bazaar. It was very beautiful with all kinds of marble. He said, I would rather sell all the marble and print books. Because temples can generally cause trouble if one is not very advanced. Then he starts arguing over who's going to take this room and who's going to take that room and who's going to be respected within the temple. This was very much a concern of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, because within temples can be fire within walls because people are very much concerned for who takes what room, who gets what material facility. In other words, it's more or less a kind of material contamination. But when one uses the money for book production and book distribution, then he's freed from such an entanglement. So this instruction was given to Srila Prabhupada during a parakram, when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati made one huge Mahaparakram all around the Vrindavan Mathura area. It went on for 45 days or so. And at that time when they were at Radhakund, he instructed Srila Prabhupada in this way. And Srila Prabhupada himself instructed us in a similar fashion in many different occasions. Because this is the basic essential principle of the movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It is called Bhagavata Vidhi. Bhagavata Vidhi means to follow the principles of those who are preaching Krishna consciousness. When you preach Krishna consciousness, then you are following the Bhagavata Vidhi. And when you are living within the temple, you are following the Pancharatriki Vidhi. At least a modified version of it. We don't follow the Pancharatriki Vidhi completely because we're too much malecha by our culture. To follow the complete Pancharatriki Vidhi is not possible for us. It's too complicated. But we follow basically the Bhagavata Vidhi. Therefore, we stress so much the preaching mission. Now, of course, generally speaking, all that we are doing within the temple is for the preaching mission. We have no other mission. But sometimes, in order to expand that, we have to engage ourselves in various Sankirtan efforts, like the Christmas Marathon, by which we can expand the preaching mission very nicely. So, we should go on with this kind of a mission, movement. We should engage in this preaching mission because it will purify us and make things very nice. So, this Krishna consciousness movement is based on this principle, and it will be sustained on this principle, and therefore it will expand also on this principle. So let us go on with this principle of giving the association of the original saintly person in the Western world, Srila Prabhupada, to all of the other people of this world, and everything will be very nice. Hare Krishna.